Greetings everyone, it is I am the one and only Lolo Bunny here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos here. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, basically a ROM hack of Mario Kart DS, but with My Little Pony Friendship is Magic theme for the Nintendo DS. So, yesterday, we did somehow manage able to tackle through the Apple Cup, and oh no, we actually did that cup really well, especially concerning for that particular points worth noting for, that we did manage to claim ourselves a glorious 3-star ranking on that particular cup so far. So overall, despite the fact that we did get ownage by some occasional blue shells every once in a while, but aside from all that stuff though, we also did manage able to select Fluttershy as our first character choice for this particular Let's Play so far. So yeah, everything else checks out there. So today for this video is that we are about to be heading off into the next cup in this particular mod, and that's what appears to be the Party Cup. And since no matter what though, we should probably go ahead and select, well, there's actually a multitude of options that we can able to go through at this point, but ultimately though, I'm also going for Pinkie Pie, considering about the fact that she loves parties so much, so as a result though it makes sense to able to actually select her, so either way. And by the way, with that particular default vehicle, which appears to be the Party Wagon, and that particular vehicle reminds me of so much of Marshmallow cards from the likes of Toad, from the likes of Mario Kart DS, except obviously though it's almost like a shape like a cupcake. So yeah, I guess that makes it totally obvious for the sake of defaults that particular, you know, dessert related thing. So either way, let's go into the Party Cup, which consists of Full Weather Circuit, Gemstone Cavern, and Vinyl Roadway, and Sugarcube Valley. So I'm very curious to know what these tracks are usually going to be represented for, so let's get to it with the first course in that particular cup, and that's what appears to be Full Weather Circuit, which is obviously inspired by Full Weather Friends episode from the likes of, you know, in Season 1, in the forms of in episode 13, where basically though that, you know, both Rainbow Dash and Applejack are competing against each other during the forms of this, you know, on-foot race, and during the forms of the actual specific autumn weather, and the music track they somehow go for in this track, and that's what appears to be Delfino Square from the likes of in, you know, Mario Kart DS. So yeah, it seems kind of strange about the fact that we might able to actually hear certain music tracks for about a multitude of times, and one of those examples being is that as soon as we make our way to the third track in that particular cup, and you can definitely know what I mean if we get into that particular subject. So anyway, there are a couple of things I want to mention to you all for something, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 11th of May today, in some cases in 2025 today, and as suffice to say, for this point, there's only like small little details I want to classify for something before we're able to actually mention about the forms of some references for the sake of the forms of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic on this particular mod. Such as, for instance though, that apparently though, we're about to be getting a yet another Nintendo Switch 2 edition game, and this time what appears to be Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which not only is going to be confirmed as, you know, Nintendo Switch 2 edition physical version as far as I'm aware, but also with the forms of the upgrade pack for Switch 1 is being confirmed. So because of that though, considering about the fact that obviously though that the Switch 1 version of the game was expected to be releasing first, and then eventually at some points that the Switch 2 edition will be releasing sometime later. So either way, chances are though is about the fact that if you do manage to able to already got the Switch 1 version of the game, chances are though you might able to consider getting yourselves the upgrade pack at some point in due time. So either way, anyways, now let's move on to the next track, which appears to be Gemstone Cavern. So obviously though, this particular location looks a bit familiar to you, especially if you've ever seen the episode called A Dog and a Pony Show. Basically though, it's about the fact that what this involves, that there's nasty diamond dogs decides able to actually capture or kidnapped Rarity, and meanwhile for Spike the Dragon and her friends, or his friends or something like that, it is up to them to able to try to rescue Rarity, while at the same time, Rarity decides to able to do a bit of a whining technique when it comes to like trying to annoy those Diamonds dogs. So yeah, you can get the idea for this particular resemblance. So, and I will say though, is that the Gemstone Cavern track is actually really difficult on my first playthrough whenever first time I play this game, or specifically for this mod anyway, because there are so many bottomless pits you might able to accidentally drove off from. Such as for instance though, in this part right here, I'm almost assuming about the fact if I see on the right side of the actual screen, on the top screen, I'm almost assuming for the fact that that's going to be an off-road section, but it turns out that's a bottomless pit. So because of that though, and the music track they go for this particular track right here, and that's what appears to be the music track based off from Luigi's Mansion, considering about the fact that that place is very spooky for Luigi's Mansion itself, and meanwhile in terms of the forms of the Gemstone Cavern, obviously though it's filled to the brim with a lot of gems, and at the same time though, what in God's name is going on with the forms of how come these Goombas somehow immediately got invited into that particular world, which I know for a fact is a little bit nonsensical, but regardless of such though, it's about the fact it's kind of strange to be able to actually see those Goombas in journey forms within the My Little Pony universe, which is very bizarre indeed. So anyway, also another thing else I'd like to classify for that thing, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that recently though, I've recently managed able to re-download Super Smash Flash 2, and the reason being for this is because the new version update has already came out just recently, since yesterday, and so much to the point that Super Smash Flash 2 beta version specifically is now on to version 1.4, and basically though they did somehow manage able to add it in the only one new fighter, and that's what appears to be King Dedede from the Kirby series. And in addition to that, they also brings us into new content such as Race to the Finish, which I always appreciate, and in addition to that, there's also some brand new stages that's going to be added, such as for instance Jungle Island based off from Super Monkey Ball, which I found was actually pretty cool, especially that what's even cool about that stage to me though, every time you do manage to get KO'd, either falling off the stage, or even some cases all-star KO, basically though, the announcer keeps on saying Fallout, considering about the fact that you will miraculously in a ball or something like that, even though it's a bit hard to explain about this particular subject though, because I did manage to able to test it out on my spare own time, and I will say though, I am so glad to be able to actually coming back on playing through Super Smash Flash 2 after all, just because of all that, well, new content has been added. So anyway, so now let's move on to the next racetrack, and that's what appears to be Vinyl Roadway. Now, what's even interesting about this racetrack to me though, is that it's obviously going to be taking place on the actual vinyl itself, and what's even crazier is that, as you can see, much like the evolves of how it does it on Baby Park from the likes of in Mario Kart DS version, we're going to be going around the track for about 5 laps, and what's even more crazy is that the music track for this racetrack is actually going to be borrowed from, well, suffice to say though, the music track for this particular stage is obviously based off from not only Waluigi Pinball, but as well as Wario Stadium as well. So we might be able to actually hear that musical track for a grand total of 3 times in this mod, which is pretty crazy, all things considered. Gee, no wonder why about the fact that Waluigi Pinball as a racetrack itself is actually way more popular these days, especially when it first introduced since in 2005, and it eventually gets remade not once but 3 times, ranging from, you know, Mario Kart 7, Mario Kart Tour, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe thanks to the Boosticles Pass DLC. So I really don't know if they're able to actually bring that course back again for the sake of the forms of Mario Kart World, although it might be seems a bit redundant, just because, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has officially been confirmed for the actual backwards compatibility for Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, chances are though is about the fact that we might able to actually see some of these other cool tracks later on for the sake of the forms of due time for the likes of the forms of when Mario Kart World will be releasing, and as far as I'm aware, that we've only just got about 25 days to go until that game is going to be releasing, alongside with the, you know, Nintendo Switch 2 itself, so either way. Also, kind of think about it, this particular racetrack is almost like a figure 8 kind of circuit track, except, well, it's actually a lot more shorter than I was expecting. So anyway, so that pretty much does it for Vinyl Roadway, and now let's move on to the final track in terms of the forms of the Party Cup, and that's what appears to be Sugarcube Valley, which is obviously almost like a a valley of some sort, filled to the brim with a lot of desserts and all that stuff, and I have no idea why that was ended up in 8th place for some reason. There might be some sort of like a technical glitch or something like that. Well, I digress. And also, taking a notice from the likes of the forms of, DK Mountain, from the likes of, Mario Kart Double Dash, alongside with the forms of, Airship Fortress from the actual Mario Kart DS. Basically, though, we're getting blasted off onto the forms of the cannon, except that obviously, though, we're getting blasted off into the one of those familiar items that Pinkie Pie usually use throughout the majority of the show itself, and as of course, the party cannon. So as a result though, same applies with the forms of the movie adaptation as well, usually not once but twice, usually for the sake of the forms of trying to blast off the largest cake to able to celebrate the forms of the Friendship Festival, and in addition to that though, they somehow use that for the second and probably the final time, to able to try to rescue Twilight Sparkle from the evil clutches of, well, let's just say Storm King and all that stuff, despite the fact that Storm King appears way later than he forms of how it does it for the majority of the film's runtime, so I digress. And I suppose that was technically the last thing I want to discuss upon actually, and that's what appears to be for the fact that Warner Brothers has been confirmed the actual name of the films of the third Godzilla x Kong film, and that's what appears to be called Godzilla x Kong Supernova. And no matter what though, it's about to be drew out at some point in 2027, the same year as the films of how it does it for Sonic the Hedgehog 4, alongside with the films of the Legend of Zelda movie, and you can get the idea for this point. And what's even more crazy about the films of that particular, Godzilla x Kong Supernova, is actually going to be on now in production kind of stuff. So because of that though, I can assure you about the fact that they might start filming there or something like that. I mean, it's a bit tricky to tell, because obviously though, we still only got about 2 years left until the actual film decides to release, alongside with the films of, Sonic the Hedgehog 4, as well as the Legend of Zelda movie, And yeah, that's as far as we're able to discuss upon in terms of today's subject. I mean, I would have liked to explain more, especially considering about the fact that there's going to be more news to come, but honestly folks, that's as far as we can able to address that. So, now I suppose there's technically the final thing I want to address the actual conversation alone, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, yeah, unfortunately though, we have decided able to do a redo Let's Play of My Little Pony Rainbow Runners at some point. Maybe at some point in during the films in October for some time, usually to try to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic TV series as a result, so yeah, you can get the idea for this point. So with that being said folks, is that we get endings up this point right here, so join me next time for more of Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, a ROM hack of Mario Kart DS, is that we're about to be moving on into the next cup, which appears to be the Dash Cup, so this will be exciting. So I'll see you guys until on next weekend. Later fellas.